So I'd like to talk about what happens when you make the connection between international students and local neighbourhoods through volunteering. What do students and communities get out of it? Why do they do it? And what are the possibilities for the future? The International Student Barometer tells us overwhelmingly that international students rate their experience of studying in Australia quite positively, but that their expectations are not met when it comes to making friends here, making Australian friends, mingling with the Australian community and having a more typically Australian experience. Why is that? I think we actually misjudge international students. We often accuse them of sticking to their own cohorts, of sticking to friends who speak the same language group, when the reality is actually that they're quite vulnerable and isolated. They're grappling with cultural adaptation. They face huge financial pressures. There's a language barrier. It's actually about basic survival for many international students. Versus Australian students, there's no doubt there's pressure on them as well, but it's different. And they come to university with their own friendship groups established. So connecting students to volunteering actually goes some way to addressing that need for community interaction. But there's actually more, and I'm interested in the spin-off effect of those volunteering programs and what actually happens as a result of connecting them to wider activities outside of campus life. International students present to us in the International Office with very complex issues. We spend a lot of time in our work in crisis mode, crisis management, fighting fires. What we did with this program, this was our big fat idea, was about being more proactive. Let's try and address the issue further up the tree so that we can actually help students build resilience, be more confident and be more proactive in solving problems themselves before it gets to that real crisis point to us in our work. So volunteering for me, I'm really interested in the fact that it builds that cultural competence. It builds that confidence in understanding what's going on out there in the community. It builds resilience in students as well. You also get to make friends, build peer networks, but importantly as well, it's about accessing services. So students get to find out what's out there beyond the university gates that they can actually access that helps them in their adaptation to their life here in Australia. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But I want to tell you a story. One of the programs that we're particularly proud of is the Sunday Lunch Club. Now, we were invited by a community group to come along one Sunday a month. They bring a group of elderly, isolated, vulnerable older people to a community hall and they give them a lunch. It's a chance for these older Australians to come together, to get out of their home where they're probably living by themselves. They don't have a lot of people interaction themselves. This community group brings them together, serves them lunch, and they invited us to partner with them. Our students go along, we help set up the lunch. The lunch is actually cooked by the community group, but our students come along, they help set up the hall, they help serve the lunch, and importantly, they're invited to join the older people for lunch, and they get to eat the lunch. And who doesn't love a free lunch? And it's also a very Australian lunch. It's a soup, a roast, and a Sara Lee. So the students get a really fantastic exposure to our sort of Aussie Sunday lunch culture. But they actually join them for lunch and have a conversation with these oldies. The students tell us that they absolutely love it for a number of reasons. One is that they miss their family. They miss their grandparents, they miss their older people in their lives, and it's really lovely for them to connect to these older people here. They're also a little bit shocked that in our culture a lot of our older people are not connected to family, to community, so they wonder about that isolation factor. And they love the free lunch. So I actually have more students than I can place at the Sunday Lunch Club. This one particular Sunday, we sat down to lunch, and this old man at the end of the table, he had a walking frame, he had a hearing aid, he had the big thick glasses, and our student and myself sat down at the table. The student was from Afghanistan, and this old man sort of leaned in and he said, you from Afghanistan, have you got 2 wives or what? Awkward, very confronting. We all wanted to dive under the table, me in particular. I'm thinking, this is not what this program's all about. But this young man sat himself up in his chair and he said, actually, sir, I do. Because my brother was killed in the war in Afghanistan, and it's now my duty to look after his wife and their children. So I came to Australia to do my masters so that I could get a better job when I go home, because now I have more mouths to feed. And you could have heard a pin drop. And what happened then was that we spent the lunch having a really profound discussion about Australia's role in the war in Afghanistan. And the community, the group there, actually understood this man's story, and he ceased to be a stereotype. And that, I think, is one of the most important parts of this program, is actually connecting people and understanding their stories. There's no doubt that since we started this program about a year and a half ago, is that there's been a huge appetite for volunteering among the international students. There's a real eagerness to get out there. The opportunities have always been there. There's a huge tradition of volunteering at this university, and it's fantastic and it's rewarded by the university. But international students weren't accessing the program because they lacked that cultural competence. They didn't understand the pathways to go about it. So what we've done is just connect the dots, is make it easier for them to volunteer. And what we've been able to show is that the willingness by the students to engage means that they actually have, as a generalisation, a better study experience because they feel more happy, more confident, more settled. I wanted to share some other, quickly just go through some of the other volunteering programs that we've been running to give you a flavour of the sorts of things that we've been doing there, because they're incredibly different and diverse. We were invited by Preston Community recently to provide some support to a community festival. We were overwhelmed. We had more than 30 students who gave up their Saturday afternoon and all day Sunday to volunteer at this community festival. They got to do things that they didn't actually know what they were, like making fairy floss. And this is our student Bowie here, who's actually had his face painted already, and he's learning about making fairy floss. They also got to make souvlakis. They got to help with the children's events at the festival. But the parents and the local community there, the students, ceased to be people that were in the shared house in the street or taking up the seats on public transport. They actually started to understand their stories and learn who they were and why they were here in the local neighbourhood. And they were so overwhelmed that these students wanted to give up their time to help them out. We've been invited by the state government and by local councils to provide students to different events. So here we've got students volunteering at the Viva Victoria Multicultural Festival in Federation Square. Again, I had 50 or 60 students that signed up. The state government, it was actually the Department of Premier and Cabinet, came back to me and said, oh, actually we only need 12. Saying, well, we've got 60, so let's try and, maximise their enthusiasm. Students get skills, they get practical skills, they get to learn about event management. They don't mind what it is that they do. They're just really happy to be involved and to get out there and to be part of something. Darebin Kite Festival, the students got to be marshals, they got to help with the fireworks display, they got to be in the information tent. And linking them to councils and state government means that, as I said earlier, they start to understand the resources, services and supports that are out there for them in the community that they can access just by being here in Australia. Thomastown Neighbourhood House, they had an open day, and again it was about advertising to the local community what sorts of things you could do at a neighbourhood house, what are the courses that are run there, what can you get out of it, and our students went along and helped and got amazing feedback. Again, the Preston Primary, they invited us to come along and be part of their day. This is one of my favourite ones, the Preston Mosque IT Literacy Project. So Preston Mosque invited us to partner with them. They wanted to set up IT classes for their elderly and new migrant Muslim congregation. And they asked if our students might be interested to come along and help teach basic IT skills. So we put the word out there, again, absolutely overwhelmed by the response. The state government funded the purchase of laptops, and we were able to provide one student per participant, one of our university students per mosque participant. And we had a women's class and a men's class. And the students from the mosque, they just wanted to learn basic IT skills because their children are at school here, at primary school or at high school, and they're engaging in an online world, and these parents felt very disempowered. They wanted to know, what is Facebook, what is email, how do you set up an email account? We even had a request, what's eBay? We've heard it's great, can you show us about eBay? So we set up these classes, and our students just went through very basic IT skills. Our students actually wrote the curriculum and delivered it, and it ended up being actually managed completely by the students. We just took a step back. But it was a fantastic partnership, and interestingly, our students that got involved, none of them were Muslim. So again, it's about breaking down those barriers. When our students get involved in these community events, it's a win-win for everyone. They get skills and experience, they get intense exposure to Australian culture, and the community gets these enthusiastic volunteers who are multilingual. It's fantastic. For the international students who get involved, it actually changes their experience of Australia. It changes their relationship to Australia. And importantly, for the communities that they engage with, it changes their perception of international students. Suddenly they cease to be an irritant in many ways, which we've had in the media, and more human. It's a story, it's a person that they can actually engage with. So where to next? I think we've shown that this program of community engagement out there beyond the campus gates has the potential to be a lot bigger than it is. It's been successful so far. I'd like to see it really grow. But I think there's a lot of ground to cover. I think that we're still in a learning curve and that we've really got a long way to go. But I'm excited by the possibilities. But I'd really like to see us strengthen that on-campus engagement. I think we can do a lot more between domestic and international students here at the university. Yes, there are constraints, there are resource constraints, there are funding constraints, time, staffing constraints, I don't dispute that. But I think we need to be more creative in our approach and find ways to bring students together in the classroom. International students are the business, political and governmental leaders of tomorrow in their home countries. And I think we have the opportunity through this engagement to forge stronger partnerships for mutual benefit. I think it's in everyone's interests. Thank you.